Hola a todos y bienvenidos a este live de Radioactiva del Planeta Rock. Hoy un gustazo poder tener con nosotros a Adam Durtiz, el cantante de los Counting Crows, una agrupación de la cual soy muy fan. Los sigo desde su debut con el álbum August and Everything After, el álbum que los lanzó a la fama a nivel mundial gracias a su éxito Mr. Jones. Ahora están lanzando un nuevo EP que se llama Butter Miracle Suit 1 y ya está con nosotros Adam Durtiz. Adam, welcome to Radioacktiva, man. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm very good.
I'm happy to hear that. To begin with, I would like to ask you, what can you tell us about this Buttermilk Suit 1? How many suits are we going to have?
I don't know. Two, maybe.
Okay.
Right now, it's just one. Right now, there's one. I'm working on a second thing, but right now, it's just the one suite.
Okay, we'll see then. But let's talk about Elevator Boots. It was the first single. Is this a song about missing live shows?
Well, no, but I do think it's about life on the road. I mean, I don't know if it's about specifically missing it, but especially in the song, they're in the middle of touring. It's about what that life is like, the way towns, people, experiences come into your life and fade out of your life. And they pass you by, they come in and out, but there's always a gig tomorrow, another one and another one. And the thrill of that, of playing music with your life is always coming again, you know?
Yeah, okay. And you mentioned in the lyrics of the song Bobby and Alice. Who are them? Is there a story behind them?
On the record, the last song of the suite is called Bobby and the Rat Kings. And that's sort of a fictional band on this record about, he's just a musician. You know, it's a story about a life in music, which has also been my life, you know.
I think you're a great storyteller. That's something I've noticed always on the lyrics of the Counting Crows. So I wanted to ask you a bit about that. Where does these stories come from?
I don't know. I mean, some of it is from my life, not the plot necessarily, but the feelings, the emotions. Those are all from my life. The stories are, you know, they're fiction writing. It's about finding a way to tell the story that communicates all the emotional truth and the feeling that you want to communicate.
And about that emotional truth, there's always something very emotional on the music of the Counting Crows, something you can relate to. It's something that is transmitted, something that is somehow passed on to everybody, like a feeling, even if you don't speak the language. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think that's part of having a great band. I mean, like, other than the singer, because I mean, how many times have you known a guy that you saw in a coffee house who was brilliant, just playing guitar by himself? And then he made a record with a bunch of musicians and it's kind of flat, you know, because they didn't really understand his music and they didn't really understand how he felt and how he sang. And I've been really lucky in my career to play in a band where they really, really listen and where they're really trying to communicate on their instruments how I feel, on the drums, on the guitars, on the pianos. Like, they play how I feel. And I think that makes my songs much, 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 much better than they would be. I mean, I'm a good songwriter, but I do think that my songs are as powerful as they are because I'm lucky enough to be in a band that makes that a priority. You know, like, these guys play so that you'll understand how I feel, even if you don't speak the language, you know? And that's how good I mean, that's the band, though. I really think they deserve a lot of the credit for that.
And I also like the sound of the guitar a lot. It somehow mixes folk and country and rock and roll and blues. And it's something that's always been there in the sound of the Counting Crows. And it also can translate on acoustic or electric. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're guys who like a lot of different kinds of music. We were always guys, we were never trying to play a specific sound because we have so much interest in so many different kinds of music, so much music we love that all kind of gets into our music and turns it into Counting Crows.
And about Buttermilk Suit 1, where are these songs born? I wanted to ask you this because if you listen to the whole discography of the Counting Crows, in some albums you get this LA feeling, but in other records it's a lot like New York. So I wanted to ask you about that.
Oh, I think so. Um, I think it has a big influence. But also because of the kind of writer I am, uh, I try and include all kinds of details: the city, the people, the name, what's on the streets, what's on the shelves in the room. Like I always have really believed as a writer, don't say, I like that girl. It doesn't communicate anything. Tell them what's on the walls or on the shelves of the room you're in, and how you feel about the girl will come through. Like the details make all the difference. And so in my songs, sense of place is a big deal. And the cities play a big role in that, because just like they play big roles in all of our lives, because places determine the way the human beings in them relate to one another. Like in New York, we all walk the streets together. We all ride the subway together. You're intermeshed with everybody. It's a part of New York. In LA, you're much more separated. It's like a bubble here, and then you get in your bubble and you drive to a bubble, and you know what I mean? That's a different kind of life. Um, for this record, I wrote all of it uh, living on a farm in the middle of nowhere in England. In the west of England. I was been spending a lot of time on my friend's farm, and I was out there a lot by myself, and I wrote all these songs while I was on this farm alone. And so they describe cities. They are about places I lived as well, but I'm sure they're affected by the fact that I was nowhere near any cities when I wrote them.
Oh, that's very interesting. And tell me a bit about how did you guys record these songs since we've been with COVID and lockdown and all that?
Well, for one, most of it was before that. I wrote most of these songs, or all of these songs, in like August and September of 2019, and then I wrote Bobby and the Rat Kings, the last song, in January of 2020. And we went into the studio, I think, the end of February for 2 weeks. And the plan was to only 5 of us went in the studio, and we would spend 2 weeks and try and get as much of it as possible done. And then we'd take a quick break, and we would bring the other 2 guitar players in and finish up with them. And so we were right at the end of the 2 weeks. It's like the first or second week of March, and the news starts to be full of COVID. Mm. And when we took that 2-week break, before we could come back with the other guitar players, the quarantine came down. So we were stuck for a few months, and we ended up finishing the other 2 guitar players' parts. Dave, Bryson, and Dan, they played their parts from home. Dan went to a neighbor's studio, and Dave has a studio in his house. So they recorded their parts at home. We sent them the tracks, and then we got back together in July, and we put it all together.
And not having the whole band in the studio somehow affects the song or the recording process?
Well, yeah, I think it did, but I think it did it in a good way. I think we have 3 guitar players, and it can be very hard to start things with so many people in the studio. It can be real chaos at first. And in a way, that's what I was trying to avoid this time, to just like not have 3 guys trying to work out their parts at the same time. And I think it really made it a lot easier on the rest of us, and on made it easier for Charlie on piano and for Jim on drums to get their things done with only 5 of us in there, with 1 guitar instead of 3 guitars. I mean, I think everybody ends up on the record anyways in the right way, but it was easier to get started with not 7 people, just 5 people. I think that actually was pretty positive.
So, when you start writing a song, how does it start? In which instrument?
Piano.
And why is that?
I can't play anything else. and I can't play piano all that well either. I don't really play very well. And when I don't write for a while, I have to teach myself to play piano again. I completely forget how to play. It's part of, I think, having a dissociative disorder, is that I don't always retain things. It's hard for me to remember things sometimes because of that. And I forget how to play piano if I don't play all the time. And it happens every time. I had to relearn how to play, kind of.
But then you can also discover something new when you're learning again, right?
Oh yeah, I think that's a big part of it, because not being very good, I have to really experiment and try in ways that people who had more facility, more skill, I think they wouldn't come up with some of the stuff I come up with, because I'm always messing around trying to discover new sounds because I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I come up with chords sometimes and the guys are like, what the hell is that chord? And I'm like, well, okay. And I have to just call it note by note. It's like an A with a B, but a G here. And the band will be like, it sounds cool, but what the hell is it? You know, I have to show them sometimes. Or I'll just tell them, okay, this one is it's a C with an A in the bass. And they'll be like, no, that's an A minor 7. And okay, great. But it's a C with an A in the bass. Make sure the A is in the bass. And they'll be like, yeah, sure. It's an A minor 7. Now, I didn't know, like, I mean, I know that now, but that's the kind of thing where, like, because I'm thinking of it differently than they would, I come up with stuff that's different than they would, you know? Yeah. So it's probably a benefit, but it's hard for me, but great for the band.
I love the line on Elevator Boots that says, I wrote it down right here. It says, get out of the house and take a ride on the radio dial. You used to do that much?
Yeah, it's the life of a rock star. Like, you leave home and you ride your radio dial all over the world, basically. You know, like, that's what you do. You get in a band, they play you on the radio, and it takes you everywhere in the world. You know, that's like kind of what you do. And I think that's a great thing. I am still caught up in the romance of that, enchanted by the romance of, like, that thing I used to listen to in my bedroom, that radio, took me everywhere, you know, took me all over the world.
Adam, before we go, are those paintings behind you Felipe Molina's?
Yeah.
And how did you guys end up working together?
Well, I think it was, we were touring on our very first record. I went wandering through art galleries, you know, in New York. And Flip was living in Queens then, I'm pretty sure. I had never had, like, money like that before. You know, I had some money and I could, you know, the idea of buying art, that's nothing I could ever have done in my life. My parents were into it, but, you know, not as my own, you know, like, and I came upon some of Felipe's paintings in this gallery in Soho, and I was just knocked out. And I stood there, like, looking at all these paintings for hours, and then I went home to the hotel, and you know, because it never occurs to you can buy art. And I went back the next day and I looked at it again, and I was like, I looked at all these paintings again, and I was like, wow, man, this guy is incredible. And I think it was like the third day I came back, and I was like, it took me a while to get my head around the idea that I could buy art, you know, because who does that? You know, and I bought his paintings, and I loved them. I loved them so much. And over the years, I like kept coming back and looking for more of his work. And eventually, you know, we got to know each other and became friends. And we used him for an album cover for the New Amsterdam record, the live record, one of the paintings I owned. And then finally, at one point, just like I did with Dave McKean for This Desert Life, where I asked, he designed a different artwork for every painting, for every song on This Desert Life. You know, I had this one painting that was my favorite one of Felipe's paintings. And I wanted to use it for the cover of Somewhere Under Wonderland, but I asked Felipe if he would paint a different painting for every one. You know, we eventually, along the way, we became really close friends. You know, he's a really good friend of mine now. And he's one of the guys that does the festival Underwater Sunshine with me. He did the art for Underwater Sunshine last year, or, you know, 2019. Yeah, he's just one of the best guys in the world. And so now I have a collection of his paintings, really. But it's something I just, like, it happened when we were touring on our first album. I just kept coming back to this gallery and looking at them. And I decided I was going to buy paintings. You know, it's all I really spent money on. For when I made money at first, I bought a bunch of CDs and a bunch of paintings. That was kind of it, you know?
Cool. It's just that while I was reading about the band, I read about Felipe, and I read that he was born in Colombia, but he left years ago, while very, very young. So I wanted to know about it.
He's the best guy you'll ever meet. He's a brilliant, you know, and he wasn't even a painter at first. He was a really good bass player. He was, his teacher was Jaco Pastorius. Flip was I call him Flip. Felipe was a bass player and still is a good bass player. And then he became a painter, and, you know, and now he lives in Kentucky. But he lived here for years. He grew up in New York City and with his family. And then he went to Connecticut for a while, and now he lives in Kentucky. And I love him. He's as good a guy as you'll ever meet.
Well, Adam, thank you very much for taking the time for talking with us here in Radioacktiva, the Rock Planet. It's been a real pleasure. I've got to say it. I shouldn't even be doing this, but I wanted to tell you, man. Thank you very much. I've followed you guys for such a long, long time, and I really, really appreciate a new record, and of course having the opportunity of talking to you for the first time. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Julio. That's exactly what you should be doing, and I appreciate it.
Well, Adam, thank you very much once again for being with us here in Radioacktiva. A real pleasure.
Thanks, man. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Adam Durtiz, cantante de los Counting Crows con Radioacktiva 97.9 en esta entrevista discutiendo sobre su más reciente álbum Buttermilk Suit One y hablando sobre el proceso creativo de escribir las canciones, lugares del mundo y todo. Un gustazo tenerlo. Los que me conocen pues saben que no había forma que no se me saliera el fanatismo, pero qué bueno poder hablar en el planeta rock Radioacktiva con los Counting Crows. Chao pues. Hola a todos y bienvenidos a este live de Radioacktiva.